Hi and welcome back again, Investigator T, to another interview. Thank you for joining me.
Yep.
So we got a new topic for discussion, but before we start, I just wanted to quickly explain to the viewers what we're doing this time and how we've done it. We've decided to move away from the Denny suspects. It's not that we're not going to go back to them. It's just that we wanted to get a little bit deeper with you into the case by going through all the evidence that was used to prosecute Stephen. Yeah. So you have been currently working through all the evidence surrounding the RAV, the blood in the RAV, the key and the license plate. I know you've been going through quite a lot, especially for someone who doesn't know the basics of the case through watching Making a Murderer Part 1 and 2. So tonight we'll go through half of the evidence, and then next time you'll be going over the bones, item FL, and finally the hood latch in the near future interview.
All right.
All right. Fine. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
Okay, so before I start asking the questions and you breaking down everything you've observed with the evidence that you've reviewed so far, we recently had a very interesting conversation regarding the findings of the actual RAV and how, in your experience here in Australia, a crime scene is managed by police. So I was hoping quickly you could tell the viewers too the way you explain it to me. Like, I'm going to be honest, I was that person that believed that the cops entered the RAV at the salvage yard and found it almost unbelievable that they would not have gone into it. You've got a missing woman, you know there could be clues in that car, if not her herself, and you just assumed that they would try to get into that car as soon as possible. Yet you told me the other night it's plausible that they didn't even go into the car in the salvage yard. So let me give everyone a chance to hear this and understand it for themselves. I'm going to set a bit of a scene, and I want you to kind of set the police side of it, if you may. So I'm missing. You know that the last time you saw me was about 5 days ago. I was with my car. You find out that my car has now been found. You attend the scene, and the scene is now in lockdown. What happens next? But more importantly, do you enter my car?
In short, no. If there was something considered suspicious with the car, or it may have any relation to the investigation, standard practice is to leave everything in situ, not enter the car at all. Like, you can look into the car, and like if the person is missing and you haven't found the body yet, you'd make cursory, like look through the windows and whatnot. But if you suspect the car's involved in a serious crime, is most likely what happened here, it's usually preserved as you find it in situ. You don't go into it, you don't have a look around, don't do anything like that, because anything you find in there can be contaminated. Once you contaminate the car, anything that you find in the car is called into question. Also, once you establish the fact that there's nothing, there's no immediate need to enter the vehicle, in Australia at least, you have to get a search warrant before you can go and look in the car itself. So once you establish that there's no real need to enter the vehicle to prevent violence or further offences or anything like that, the car basically gets completely isolated, secured, and then taken away and examined in a controlled environment, so that whatever you find in there isn't compromised at all, because things like cross-contamination. So if you happen to, say, for example, you're at, say, for example, Teresa's house,
yep.
And you touch something or rub against something that might have her DNA on it, or someone else's DNA on it, then you find the car and you go into it and you can transfer that DNA. It just gives defence lawyers a whole lot of opportunity to pick holes in your evidence. So mostly, not all the time, but most of the time, the car, once you find it, have a quick look and make sure there's nothing serious in there you need to attend to straight away. Then it gets pretty much frozen in time, taken to a controlled environment and examined.
That's awesome. So just quickly to recap, it is plausible that they didn't actually go into that RAV on the salvage yard. All they had was a tarp over, because they said that there was rain coming and they just wanted to stop it from getting wet. So you are actually saying it is true that they could have held off and didn't open that car until they got into a controlled environment such as a crime lab.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, that's all I kind of wanted to do, was just kind of touch base on that. Let's move forward to the questioning of the evidence in the case. So we'll start with the RAV itself. The first question, who do you think planted the RAV? Was it law enforcement or the killer?
Well, going on there's a couple of things that make me think that it was law enforcement more than anyone else. The vehicle was reported missing around the second, because Ryan actually brought up flyers, which had the registrations numbers and all that on the car. On the third, when Colburn was on the dock, called into dispatch with the registration numbers, and then there's documentation saying that the vehicle was seized on the third. So I have to take that evidence as, well, on face value, really, and think that from the 3rd of November, the vehicle was in the police custody. So unless someone other than law enforcement knew where the vehicle was, knew the significance of the vehicle, were able to access the vehicle, get it out of wherever it was being stored, and then take it to the Avery's yard, it would have to be law enforcement because they were in possession of the vehicle from the 3rd. So for mine, based on the documentation and what Sergeant Colburn said in the stand, I'd have to say it would be law enforcement. There's no other party that would have access to the vehicle that were able to get it out of the yard. And the only way it could have been other than law enforcement was if someone from law enforcement let the other party, whoever that mystery party may be, and get access to the vehicle, to the RAV, and then let them take it to the yard. It's implausible that they would do that.
Yeah, because, you were mentioning before that you're like, when did the case become like a homicide inquiry? And I'm like, well, actually, on that documentation that you were just speaking about, that the car was seized on the 3rd, on that exact same paperwork, it actually states that Teresa is missing. So it seems like there's a lot of, stuff around that documentation that you kind of, like you said, you have to take it as face value and go, well, hang on a minute, this is pretty full-on stuff here. You've got a car seized on the 3rd, you've got Colburn talking shit on the stand, he's sweating, he's been caught. I know where you're going with that, and I just wanted to point that out, that, yeah, even on that documentation, Teresa's listed as kidnapped. So I think that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going on the phone call to dispatch, just from the sound of it, he called in the plates and pretty confident at what he was seeing.
Yeah.
The make and model of the vehicle wasn't confirmed by dispatch. It was confirmed by Colburn. Whether he knew that from the flyers that had been distributed a few days before, or he was actually looking at the plates, I'm pretty sure that he was actually looking at the vehicle, and that he knew the status of the vehicle from the flyers. Yeah. So it would seem incredible to me that police or the law enforcement weren't in custody of the RAV from the 3rd. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't see how it wouldn't be.
Yeah. Okay, so question 2. How do you think they planted it?
Well, that's pretty easy, really. They would have just driven it from the storage yard where the vehicle was being stored and just taken it to Avery's yard. I actually find there was affidavit evidence from one of the neighbours.
Yeah, Siebert, the witness, yeah.
Yeah. Stating that he saw a vehicle matching Teresa's being driven to the yard via the back entrance.
Yeah.
which would make sense to me, obviously, because if you're trying to plant a vehicle on a yard, you don't want anyone to see. A sworn affidavit from Siebert saying that he saw that vehicle I think that stands up as well. He has no real motive to fabricate his story at all. He's not in it. There's no gain, there's no loss. He's just stated merely what he saw. And the fact that there was two vehicles with the RAV, like the RAV itself, and there's another white vehicle.
Yeah, the white Jeep apparently went in, and it was the only vehicle that entered out.
Yeah. Then obviously the second vehicle, the matching Teresa's vehicle, was left in the yard. So
yeah,
I would, for mine, it would seem that law enforcement have taken the vehicle on the 4th, I think it was. Siebert seen it and made an affidavit stating it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be, I think that's where everyone's mind was at for a long time. You know, you can't deny that, especially knowing that two cars go in, one car comes out. You know, you've also got Avery saying he saw lights around that time as well. Yeah. So you know that there's something going on. It's matching all these other witnesses' accounts of what's happening.
Yeah, Siebert's descriptions of the two vehicles were quite, well, they're not absolutely detailed, but he knew what colour they were, what sort of model shape and that sort of thing. So there's enough there to make that account reliable. I think if he was too detailed, I think it would be a little suspect. Yeah. Especially considering the time of night that the vehicle was taken there. Mm-hmm. But because he's kept it kind of, I suppose, strictly what he saw, I think it's quite a reliable piece of evidence to suggest that there was a vehicle matching Teresa's that was taken to Avery's, followed by another white vehicle that left on its own. Absolutely.
So this one's an interesting one, which we've tried to, I've tried to encounter into all the questions that I'm going to ask you. But question 3, how would you do it? How would you, as a police officer, plant the RAV? Or even as a killer, as a planter as yourself, how would you do it?
Yeah, well, obviously you don't want anyone to see, so it would be on a back road. It would be at an entrance that isn't, that's not highly visible, like the front gate. That would just be silly, because you've got to drive past, I think you have to drive past the residential places on the property as well.
So you would have had to pass like Mama Avery's, you would have had to pass, no doubt. Yeah. There was a few of them that live on that stretch, so it wouldn't have been just a straight to Avery's or whatever. So like you said, that back entrance was just like a get in, get out kind of, make it easy to be found, whatever, I'm out.
Yeah, and it was done at night as well. Also, while Stephen was gone, I think because when Stephen gave evidence that he saw lights around the back of his property, to me that suggests whoever had the vehicle was waiting for him to leave and wanted to get in and out as quick as they could. Mm-hmm. But they made a bit of a mistake in not letting Avery get away far enough that he wasn't able to see their lights. Yeah. They must have been waiting for him to leave and then quickly ducked in with the RAV. But they were a little bit too premature and were seen. So that's the only thing that I would have probably waited for. But I mean, if you're trying to plant evidence in a manner like that, I don't suppose that you're just going to wait around on the chance that he might come back actually finding you doing it. So as soon as it made motions that he was going to leave, they've just quickly taken the opportunity to get in there.
That's why a lot of people have thought that while this moment, the car might have been seized on the 3rd, and that they had, the boys club had that initial meeting going, right, we're going to frame Avery, because that conversation would have had to have happened. There would have been a moment that they got together, a few of them, and went, this is our chance to frame him, let's go for it. I'm wondering whether there was people watching him, like the cops were watching him, and when he left that night, there was radioed in and said here's our moment, move, move, move. And that's when they've made, because like you said, someone would have had to know.
Obviously, they've waited for Avery to leave the property.
Yeah. So
but they made a mistake of not letting him get far enough away before he noticed them. So it would be an incredible coincidence if it just say they were already on their way to plant the RAV.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that Avery happened to see them. They would have been waiting for him to leave.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
but
absolutely.
Again, I don't. And another thing I thought of was if I was Avery, I would have torched that car. There's no way I would have left it anywhere near to be found. It's implausible to me that he would leave such a vital piece of evidence on his own property and not burn it. It doesn't make sense.
And yet you've got apparently the most cleanest masterminding, criminal you've ever met, because when they search his trailer where this absolutely traumatic rape, torture, death scene happened, they did not find one strand of evidence, yet he's leaving evidence in a car with his blood in it. Come on.
Yeah.
You're either incredibly stupid or incredibly smart.
And I think the reason for that is because he wasn't in possession of the RAV at any time. I think it was always in possession of law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, he would have disposed of it.
Oh, absolutely. So just to sum up with the big question. Okay, so this is like the big question of the RAV. Is there one or is there two RAVs? And what do you think?
Well, I believe there's one RAV for a couple of reasons.
Yep.
First reason is the time frame that it would take to source a second vehicle matching the description of Teresa's RAV. It's quite a unique vehicle, not in itself because the Toyota RAVs are quite a common vehicle, but having a custom sunroof really makes it difficult to find another vehicle of that exact same description.
Oh, the good old sunroof. That small, significant detail of the RAV that people like to ignore. Yeah,
and the second, the time frame is obviously a big one, but the second one is there would be no real reason to plant a second vehicle because it would be that the whole effort in framing Avery would be rendered moot if the vehicle was found to not be Teresa's.
Exactly. Oh my God, exactly. Yes, absolutely.
It would be, just what, and then as a knock-on effect, I suppose, from that would be the deflection of suspicion toward why would you be planting another vehicle that doesn't belong to Teresa and trying to make it appear as if it was. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very dangerous to plant a second vehicle trying to pass it off as the original. It doesn't work for me at all.
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to touch base on a few things you said because, when I sent you all this stuff, I tried to keep it unbiased. I didn't want you to know how much I believe there was one RAV. I sent you a lot of Millbillies stuff so you could get a feel that there could be two RAVs, get you to look through everything. But that sunroof to me was what sealed it, We have a researcher named Kaf who actually found photos of Kelly Pitson when they went around on a holiday with Teresa and her RAVs in the background. And you can visibly see the sunroof and the wind protector that is also on it, an additional feature. A lot of people say that the photo of Teresa standing in front of her car was altered, so you can't see that there was no sunroof there. But again, unless they're altering every picture that ever exists of Teresa, especially Kelly Pitson's, that sunroof is very clear. You can see it. And yet,
the sunroof's not the only identifying feature. There's VIN numbers as well.
Yep.
Which are a lot harder to obviously doctor than a picture of a sunroof.
Yeah.
And there's no way they would have considered that vehicle as an exhibit unless it was known to be Teresa's. So the VIN plates would have been checked. Otherwise, it could have just been literally any vehicle they found on Avery's property because there's thousands of vehicles, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was like over 3,000 to 4,000. So absolutely.
What's the proof that this RAV is Teresa's vehicle other than someone saying that's Teresa's RAV,
Yeah.
the investigators would have confirmed that it was her vehicle. Because again, what's the point in planting something that if it's found out, the whole exercise is moot?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
And you're right about the time frame. Like if people want to logically think that her RAV was found on the 3rd by Colburn in the afternoon, yet planted on the salvage yard by the evening of the 4th or the night of the 4th, like you said, that window of opportunity to find that RAV that has all those specific details Danita's past of as hers is pretty slim.
It's implausible. Like, it's not impossible, but I'll be stunned if they manage to find an exact same match of vehicle with the sunroof.
But in saying that,
even if they did, the VIN numbers wouldn't match.
But in saying that, does the colour cause concern for you at all? You have the mum saying dark green kinda. You then have a search warrant saying a blue RAV. Then we have a bluish green car seized. But while we're actually talking about search warrants, the fact that they lied in it saying blue and getting Karen's call in wrong by 2 hours of Teresa missing, how significant is that, and does it affect a warrant's merit?
Not really, no. The application for the warrant would have been drawn up by the detectives, and just little things like colour or that colour could be disputed. I mean, blue-green's quite a similar type colour shade.
Mm-hmm.
So the application for the search warrant itself would have been gone over with a fine-tooth comb by the judge that signed it.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, detectives are pretty meticulous about those sorts of things, even if they were, corrupt in some way. Because if the application is found to be fabricated or false or unreliable in any way, then the knock-on effect of that is the warrant doesn't get affected. It's what gets found as a result of issuing that warrant. So if the application is examined in court and the warrant is called into question, if the application is found to be false, then any evidence seized as a result of that application is contested, like heavily contested. And I've had a number of cases where defence lawyers have requested. We don't normally disclose those sorts of things to the lawyers because they don't need to know the grounds of the search warrant unless they suspect that there's something up or there's something dishonest with the application itself. Most of the time, we try and keep those things as honest and as straightforward as we can because we know that whatever we find as a result of the application can be called into question later on if we don't do it properly. The fact that they got colours, if he said like a yellow or a red RAV, that might be a cause for concern, but blue-green, not for mine, and the time frame is roughly, it's not days out or weeks out, it's only a couple of hours, so that really wouldn't make too much difference. I think a defence lawyer would be struggling to make an issue with those sorts of details in an application.
Absolutely. And just lastly on that bit, I also gave you pictures of inside the car. I sent you some of Millbilly's videos to look over, and there seemed to be some bolts missing and some panels missing from the inside of the car. What do you make of that, if anything? Could that have been from them taking it apart, say, if they did seize it on the 3rd?
It's hard to say. They wouldn't have touched the vehicle unless they knew its significance in whatever plan they had come up with to frame Avery.
Yeah.
At that point in the investigation, I'm pretty sure that she was only listed as missing, possibly kidnapped.
Yeah.
So there's no real need to manipulate anything or alter anything in the vehicle itself. Those missing panels and stuff, they're quite a conundrum for me because for mine, looking at the end goal of framing Avery, I don't think there was really any real need for them to do that.
Yeah.
and the vehicle was either found like that or it was as a result of maybe afterwards when they put the blood in the car.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so now we've talked about the blood in the car. Let's move on to that. Question 1. Who do you believe planted the blood in the RAB? Was it the killer or was it law enforcement?
Yeah, this was a bit of a weird one because there are two types of blood that were found in the car. There was flake and there was a fresh drip pattern.
Yep.
With the flake, the blood's dry. It didn't soak into any of the fibres in the carpet where it was found, which would indicate that it was dry before it was obviously put there. So, yet there's a splatter pattern on I think it was the door frame.
Yep, the door frame.
To have wet blood and flake would indicate that there's two different stages of congealment with the blood, and obviously you can't. I find it really implausible that you can have both in the same vicinity at the same time and expect that blood to have come from the same source. You either have a splatter pattern or you have dry blood that's scraped off. So the only other, it was suggested, and I think I watched a couple of those videos that you sent me, that they could possibly have pulled the blood from Avery's sink because he said it was cleaned up and stuff like that. But that's pretty hard. I mean, the blood that the experiment that they did with the sink and the little syringe, that blood was fresh, so they would have. If Avery's bleeding in a sink, it doesn't take long for blood to dry at all, as we all know. It takes less than 10 minutes. So they would have had to have gone into Avery's trailer, lifted the blood, and put it in the RAV before it congealed. So the only other likely source of blood that law enforcement would have had ready access to was the vial that was stored in the clerk's office.
Yeah, the 1985 vial, his blood sample, yeah.
And there's something dodgy around that as well because they couldn't check for the congeal, the anticoagulant.
Yeah, the ETA.
And that would be that was a major thing for me. If they were able to test for that, then that would throw that whole blood evidence into question.
Yeah.
But as it was, they couldn't. And I think it was the DA said they were going to go ahead with the prosecution anyway without those results, which I found was quite surprising. And I think the reporters found it quite surprising as well. So for mine, I think it's highly unlikely that anyone took blood from Stephen Avery's trailer and put it in the RAV because the time frames were so tight from when the blood came out of Stephen's finger, landed on a sink, and ended up in the RAV. It's just, there's no way it would have dried and hardened in 20 minutes. So the only other source of blood that I can think of, or that I've been exposed to, I think at this point in time, is the blood vial that was in the clerk's office.
Yeah.
And I did have a close look at the vial itself, and there's normally when blood's taken from someone like that, there's an evidence cap on it. It's sealed. It's like, but this thing was just pretty much just like lying around willy-nilly. It kind of struck me actually how lax that the security of that vial was. So I'll have to say, if I had to say, I would say the blood came from the vial, but that still doesn't. You can still get flake from around the cap of the vial.
Yeah.
Obviously, the anticoagulant, if it doesn't get into every single molecule of blood, there will be dry blood around like the edges and maybe at the top of the vial and that sort of thing where it's already dried. So I'd say it came from the vial, if anywhere.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned this timeline of how it could have been like the blood in the sink versus the vial, because what makes it interesting is in Zellner's latest response, which I want everyone to know that you have looked over it. She mentions Bobby being the main Denny suspect and constructed a timeline that fits him as having the proximity and the opportunity to plant this blood. Therefore, going by Zellner's timeline, he also would have been the one who would have had to plant the car or back on the property, because the timeline that Zellner has created, it debunks people like you and me who honestly believe that the car was then seized by the police on the 3rd.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be possible how Bobby could plant the blood in a car the night that Stephen bled all over his bathroom if the police had it.
Yeah.
Also, I found it odd because she contradicts the importance of Ryan having the day planner and the knowledge of the front rear light. Again, if Bobby was responsible for all the movement of the car and the blood, how is it that Ryan got hold of some pretty significant evidence and some of the details of like the front bumper? And then I have to wonder,
he wouldn't have known of that at all.
Exactly. And then I have to wonder, is that Zellner's way of creating her own smoke and mirror for the police, making them believe she isn't going to go after them in court by pointing the fingers? Because are they going to take her serious if all her motions and her defense was cops did this and cops did that? I guess creating this timeline also sets her up for being able to snook at others. When she eventually questions them all, they might be able to debunk one thing, but when they get caught off guard with another, especially Ryan, who thinks he got away with it, and as all the attention right now is just on Bobby.
Yeah, for mine, Ryan's still the main suspect, easily.
Yeah.
Easily. I mean, I would just because I wouldn't base a search history as motive for murder.
I know. I feel ya. Question 2. When do you believe it was planted? When do you think the blood actually got in there?
I was just looking at this. It would have to have been. I think it was before it was put in the Avery's yard, because the white vehicle left pretty much straight away, which would indicate that they didn't have a lot of time to do things, because there was a whole lot of other stuff as well that was happening, like the plates were removed, which takes a bit of time, especially if they're hard to get off. You can't just take plates off in 20 seconds. It takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't take a lot of time to drop a bit of blood here and there. But where the blood was found would indicate to me that there was some time that was taken to consider where to position the blood and that sort of thing. So it could have been in the Avery's yard, but I just, from my own instincts, I think they would have done it in the yard where the RAV was stored when they seized it on the 3rd.
Yeah.
Would make sense, because they would have access to the RAV in a safe environment. They would have access to the blood, again from a safe environment, and it would be easy for them to transport the blood from the vial to the RAV without raising any suspicion whatsoever.
Yeah.
If they put the blood into the RAV on Avery's yard, they leave themselves open to getting discovered doing that.
Absolutely.
It's not for me to say whether they would have been that careless in doing that, because, I mean, there's a whole lot of things in this case that don't really add up. But if it was me, I would do it in as safe an environment as I could, set the whole car up, stage it so that it looks like Avery did it, and then take it straight to Avery's property, leave it there, and then leave as quick as I could.
Yeah.
So it was done whilst it was in police custody before they put it on the Avery's yard.
There has been question that there's been another source of possibility, and that's the blood came from Stephen's truck itself, because we know that when he cut his finger originally, he actually bled in his own truck. And people think that it's plausible that the blood was hydrated by water, turning it back into like a liquid form from that, and then smudged into the RAV. And then it also explains the flakes, because the flakes could have been scraped from his car surface. The one thing that always has everyone turning their little minds with this bit is, you've got where did the blood come into it? Because you've got Mike Holbart, which is Teresa's brother, not long after they've seized the car, you've got him in front of the cameras saying, we're happy because there seems to be no foul play. Is that, why would the cops say that to a family, saying, there's nothing in there if there was no blood at the time that they looked? Or is that, again, it's the timeline. You kind of go, why would the cops tell a family there's no foul play, yet we now know that there was all this 6 deposits of blood around the car, and we now know that there was Teresa's blood found supposedly in the back, so how is that not foul play?
They would have to scrape quite a lot of blood, because I had a look at the drip pattern that was found on the door frame, and that's quite significant. That's a lot of blood. It didn't look watered down at all.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like fairly. I mean, it's hard to say just from photos and stuff, but it looked like a pretty decent blood drop, from a syringe or something like that. They would have had to scrape that blood off and dilute it with a fair amount of water. So I don't know. It just doesn't. It's just less likely than getting the blood from the vial.
Yeah. So
and they would have had to have access to Avery's truck as well.
Well, yeah, they did seize that because there was Colburn actually. No, I think it was Colhane actually took the swabbings of his car. So there's her admitting that she had got blood samples from his car. So everyone's like, oh God, here we go. Did she swap the samples over? It's one of those things. It's the timeline, like you said to me, throughout this whole process of you going through all this. You kept going to me. I would get message from you going, this timeline, you think you're going somewhere with it, and then all of a sudden you come to a full stop and go, Jesus Christ, now what? You don't expect another twist to come. So, yeah, I totally get what you mean. Question 3, though. How would you have done it? How would you have framed him? How would you, as a law enforcement, frame him with blood?
Well, if I was law enforcement, I think the easiest way is to just get the blood out of the clerk's office and put it in Teresa's car.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the vehicle, you got the blood, you got a safe place to do it. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. What about the locations of the blood that it was found? Do you think that's strange? Like you've got on the door.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if basically it would seem that they're alleging that Stephen drove the car from wherever it was alleged that he's killed Teresa, or wherever the car was in any case, back to his own property. He had the cut on his hand, so you would expect the normal places to find blood: gear lever, steering wheel, door handles, those sorts of things. But they're not. They're just in random kind of places. Like where they found the blood just doesn't make sense. If he was dripping that much from a cut finger, there will be drop patterns all over the place.
Yep, absolutely.
Carpet, there would be the blood seeping into the fibres, but it's all pretty random, man. It's not. It's
I know.
Yeah.
So the bonus question.
What more can I say? It's dodgy as hell.
It is dodgy as hell. So the bonus question to sum up the blood in the RAV. Do you believe that they even have Teresa's RAV in storage anymore? And in your opinion, why do you think they are scared to give Kathleen, Stephen's new lawyer, that car for further testing?
Do you mean Teresa's RAV, like her real RAV, or the alleged second RAV?
I'm talking about her real RAV.
Yeah, absolutely they do. I mean, otherwise, what happened to the RAV after they examined it? Do you know?
Well, they have got it. They said that they've got it in a storage container and it's locked. Zelna has tweeted, I think it was in 2018, maybe 19, and said, "Hey everyone, the RAV is safe." But there's a lot of people that believe that there's two RAVs were like, "Nah, it's gone. It won't exist anymore." They would have destroyed it because they don't want her to discover that it was a phony.
I see. Yeah. Well, no, I would have to say that they would either, if Zelna's tweeted that the RAV is safe, then where'd she get that information from?
Well, we don't know. That's the only information she tweeted. She just went, "I want everyone to know that the RAV is safe."
Yeah.
So
well, I'm convinced there's only one RAV. So if she's convinced that the RAV is safe, then yes, Teresa's RAV is still in police custody. What normally happens after a case like a murder case like this is the evidence gets kept for. There is a statute of limitations for how long they keep evidence for a murder for. I think it might even be life. They generally don't give that stuff back if they know the vehicle was involved in a murder.
Mm-hmm.
Even murder evidence won't ever be handed back to the family ever.
Oh, well.
It'll just stay in police custody forever.
Well, it's definitely going to get interesting when we get into the bones, but we'll leave that one. So let's move on then to the key. Well, who do you think planted the key?
I think this is a fairly easy one to answer. It would have to be Sergeant Colburn.
Yeah.
It's he's had access to Teresa's house on a number of occasions where he could have found the key, knew what he was looking for, and found the key. He had access to Avery's trailer, again on a number of occasions. That access that he had to Avery's trailer was also unsupervised on a number of occasions.
Yep.
Just going on what Kucharski. Yeah, Deputy Kucharski said that when he was on the stand, that Colburn was unsupervised on certain occasions in the trailer.
Yeah.
The one that found the key, which immediately raises alarm bells, shaking the cabinet like he did.
Yeah. The cabinet of Narnia.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you can't get away from the fact he's the only one that would have had, he was the one that had access to Teresa's house, found the key. He's the one that had access to the trailer and found the key. He was unsupervised in Avery's trailer as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he has the motive to do it.
Absolutely. So question 2, how do you think they did it? How do you think Colburn did it? Exactly how he did it, or do you think there was a little bit more to it? Or
Oh, no. I mean, if you just think about the mechanics of planting a key, it's fairly simple. You go around to Teresa's house, you find it, you take it into Avery's trailer, wait till no one's looking, you drop it behind the cabinet and shake the cabinet and go, "Hey, look, I found the key."
Yep, easy.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, really. It's not, you're not bloody, you're not a criminal mastermind by figuring out how to plant a key.
So question 3, do you believe it's her key? And what do you think about Stephen's DNA being only on it and with such high results of DNA?
Yeah, I'm assuming here, but if the detectives were, from my own experience, if I found a key to a vehicle that was suspected in being involved in a murder, I would probably try the key out and make sure it actually belongs to the car that you're looking at, because otherwise what's the point in sending the key away to get examined if it doesn't even belong to the vehicle? I mean, you're just wasting resources and time. So was that key ever tested in the REV, did you say?
Yes, so it is alleged that it was tested in the ignition and it turned over, but because the battery was disconnected, it didn't start. It was actually Colhane. It's in Colhane's documentation that she did that. I don't think there's any witnesses to say that they witnessed her actually turning it over. It just leaves it at word value that Colhane's telling the truth. But you kind of got to have a little bit of you can't be blamed for having no faith in her findings at this present time. But no, that is where we're at. There is alleged that it was tested.
The key unlocked the ignition.
Yeah, it unlocked the ignition to turn, but the battery was flat. Well, not flat, disconnected. My apologies. So,
and that brings me to the same sort of point with the REV itself. Why plant a key that doesn't have any relevance to the investigation or doesn't tie Teresa to Avery?
Mm-hmm.
If the key wasn't the original or a key that was fitted for Teresa's REV, there is no point in planting it, because it will just be another moot point if it ever gets caught. And it's a simple process to find out if that key is actually related to Teresa's REV at all. You wouldn't plant something that isn't relevant to the REV.
Absolutely.
And the DNA on the key fob itself, that's another fairly easy one to do. I think it was suggested in some of those videos that they use Avery's toothbrush.
Yeah, the toothbrush.
To rub all over the key. But realistically, you're in Avery's trailer. The whole thing is basically a DNA bank. You could have rubbed that thing on the couch and got as much DNA as you wanted off the couch.
Yeah.
Or there's anything. You could have picked up a piece of clothing off the floor and just wiped it clean, and then planted it from there. That also raises an interesting point about why there was no other DNA found on it. I thought about that a little bit as well. The key was a spare, which means that Teresa may not have used it very often, and that there was no DNA left on the key at all because she hadn't touched it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
DNA lasts a long time, but so that seemed fairly inconclusive. So the only other suggestion to me was it was either wiped clean by the application of Avery's DNA, like a pair of underwear or a toothbrush that's been suggested, or when Colburn found the key, he was wearing gloves.
Yeah,
it's pretty. So it's not unusual to just have Avery's DNA on it, although I don't know. You could expect. I mean, it would not be surprising to find Teresa's DNA on the key as well, but it depends on how long it had been since she handled it, or if any other time someone else has handled the key. It's quite hard. Skin epithelials don't really, they unless you're like a shedder,
mm-hmm.
You're not going to leave your epithelials just lying around willy-nilly.
Unless
you handled the key very recently, it wouldn't be surprising to not just have for Teresa's DNA to not be on there.
Because Millbilly actually has played me a jail phone call where Jody, his girlfriend, is going through the trailer and she's cleaning up after they've gone through it, and she says to him, like, Stephen, why is your toothbrush under the sink? And he's like, I don't know. Like, he's actually really shocked as well because he usually keeps it on the top, and all of a sudden his toothbrush is missing and it's found under the sink. So, and then with the DNA having such high results and, Zellner's experts turning around going, unless he licked the key, it's like such a high source, saliva, and then you match that up with his toothbrush going missing. I think that's why a lot of people just go, that's a really easy solution for Colburn to just discover.
The main way we take DNA here is through buccal swabs.
Yeah.
So, and we basically tell the guys to swish the thing around like they're brushing their teeth. So that could explain where that high concentration of DNA come from.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
it could have come from anywhere else as well. But that's, if you're going to look at it objectively, that's the most likely source of where the DNA came from. Would explain why it's such a high concentration as well.
Yeah. So, question 4 on this one is, if you were planting the key, how would you have done it?
Yeah, I mean, again, this isn't rocket science. How would I plant the key? It would be literally as easy as just dropping it in the trailer and pointing to the key and saying, "Hey, look, I found the key."
Yeah.
I mean, the deputy that was there wasn't really taking much attention, so it would have been very easy for Coburn to just drop the key and just go, "Look, I found it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty easy. It's not hard.
Yeah. You did mention before the phone call, before we started this interview, when we were just going through some stuff, you're like, the one thing you would have done is definitely added some DNA on it to show that, that there was like a little bit of a mixture there. So if they had access to anything of Teresa, you'd kind of rub it on that just to give it that extra
authenticity.
Yeah. But it is what it is.
It would have been the only other thing that I would have done. But I suppose it would require a little bit of forethought.
Yeah.
And unless he's really worried about what's going to get found on the key during the forensic exam and the possible questioning of why there was no other DNA on it, there'd be I would just do it just to make the lie more elaborate.
Yeah.
Rather because, like you say, it's unusual to just find one DNA match on such a high concentration.
Yeah. I also noticed you were saying to me before that you thought that Colburn might have known Steve because he referred to him as Steve.
Yeah, that was when he said that. It was almost a flippant off-the-cuff remark, which indicates to me there's a fair amount of familiarity there.
Yeah.
Steve, I never refer to my accused persons on almost a nickname basis. It's usually the last name. So I'd always be referring to Stephen as Avery this, Avery that, Avery this, Avery that. But just calling him Steve, I don't know, it just struck a nerve. It just didn't hang true to me. It just seemed like there was something odd there. Like, that's not what especially a police sergeant, that's not a way that you refer to an accused. It's just not. It indicates a lack of professionalism. And that kind of familiarity where you've kind of, you're taking things personally with them.
Yep. And I know you were pretty dirty about Andy's lack of professionalism with recording stuff. You were saying to me you couldn't believe that he could get away with not writing up things. Paragraphs is just insane.
It blew me away. I had to rewind the video like 2 or 3 times and actually just make sure I didn't, miss something, or I actually heard what I actually heard. During the entire investigative process, he'd made less than half a page of notes. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. That is ridiculous. Absolutely unheard of. Honestly, in the even just the serious assault case or something like that, I would make pages and pages, literally pages of notes. And the number of singular different actions that Colburn was involved in, the amount of times he went to Teresa's house, how he found the RAV, how he was in the trailer, how he found the key, the amount of exhibits he must have seized. To have half a page of notes is, pardon my French, but fucking obscene. Obscene.
Yep.
Absolutely just ridiculous. It's like this guy put on a uniform from high school and went to the police station and said I'm a sergeant.
Oh my God.
Mind blowing.
Yep.
I can't even understand. I'm just stunned. If like, you could be smacking me across the face with a cold trout, and I wouldn't be more surprised.
I'm just want to say though, before we finish that with the key bit of it, interesting fact, Colburn wasn't a stranger to the salvage yard. He frequented there often for parts for his car, and he actually knew Stephen's brother Chuck. So the fact that you picked up on that, sense of they knew each other, or, again, it also highlights the fact that he wasn't a stranger to the salvage yard. He might not have known it like the back of his hand, but he knew the salvage yard. So it kind of gives him that, credibility that he could have planted that car and knew where he was going.
Like I said before in one of our earlier interviews, people operate in environments that they're comfortable in.
Yep.
So if he visited that yard previously on a number of occasions, and he refers to Avery as Steve, he would have been well comfortable with that salvage yard, and it would have been easy for him to do what he did.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go on to the last bits. The number plates, they're pretty straightforward. Who do you think planted the plates, the killer or law enforcement?
Law enforcement, obviously, because they are in possession of the plates.
Yep.
That's about it, really. Although, I have to say, I don't understand why they would have removed the plates and then stashed them in another part of the yard. Because, well, for one, it hinders the identification of the RAV, which they would want to have, so that they could prove it was Teresa's, so that they can then carry on with the seizure and examination. And two, it just seemed odd to me that they would do that because it's another overt action that could have been seen by someone. It didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And you gain nothing from it. You're just opening yourself up to getting caught.
Because my next question actually was, why would you remove the plates? Like, why would you? And I remember you saying to me before, like, your only thought could have been that they removed it because they needed to hide its identity from getting it from one location to the other, because that one distinctive feature could have undone them, kind of thing.
Yeah, that was the other. When for mine, when they were driving the car, because they'd have had to. It's clear to me that they drove the vehicle from wherever it was stored at the storage yard to Avery's property. They drove it. It wasn't taken on a flatbed or anything like that.
Yeah.
So taking the plates off would have helped, I suppose, if make the vehicle less identifiable, maybe when they're transporting it. That would be the only reason why I think they would have taken the plates off.
Yeah.
Because the plates were found later on, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. They were actually found, ironically, by a fireman who was just walking past, or he was working on that row of cars and happened to look in and saw them looking like they were folded up in a back seat of a station wagon. But the irony of it is that Colburn and Link, the guys that found the key, had worked on those exact same cars, that same row, just before popping the boot. So we know that Colburn and Link again was in the same proximity just before these plates were found. I just wanted to go back though when you said the reason why the plates could have been removed being the fact that they were trying to get the car from A to B. I never really looked at it like that. It's actually really clever. You've got the colour was in question at the time. Everyone was looking for this dark green RAV. But like you said, the one feature that any of the member of the public could have identified it was those plates. You have the flyers with the plates. You have the news covering it with the plate number. So to hide it, to get from part A to part B, even for the killer, even if it wasn't the cops and it was the killer, removing those plates, bought them time, because again, like, they're looking for this dark green car. Without those plates on it, you've now separated it from being identifiable from what the public knew, what they were meant to be looking for.
And that surprised me a little bit, because I suppose they didn't have time when they put the vehicle in the yard on the 5th or the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So the key and the plates were found on the same day, weren't they?
The key and the plates were found on the 8th, yeah.
Yeah, on the same day. So because Colburn had access to the key and access to the proximity where the key was found, he also had access to the plates, and he also had access to the proximity where the plates were found. That points the finger for mine as Colburn having the opportunity to be able to do both those things.
Yeah.
He had a motive to do both those things. And why they didn't, it didn't make sense to me why they took the plates off when they put the vehicle there. But then I thought about it, and like you said, they were taking the plates off when they were transporting the vehicle as it's only a real identifying feature. But then they wouldn't have time to have stashed the plates the night they put the RAV on the yard, because Avery had already come back.
Well, yeah, and the other thing I was thinking, though, like, I always thought, how do we know that the plates weren't in the back of the boot, the same as the front broken light? And Annie just went and placed them in another car to spread the evidence around to make the salvage yard a more concrete crime scene. You know what I mean? Because how would they explain plates in the back of the car? Like, a killer wouldn't do that. They would, like, cut them off and throw them in the bush or whatever. But to bring them back with you on the scene, to me, is just so they can open up the salvage yard as being the primary crime scene.
Yeah.
It just spreads it around.
No, I hear you. And that comes back to why even leave the RAV as a live exhibit? Why wasn't it burned?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end, but question 3, so how would you do it? How would you have planted the plates?
Well, again, we're coming up with the criminal mastermind method of walking along the line of cars, having a look in a vehicle and chucking them in.
Yep.
It's simple as that. As simple as that.
Okay, so then we have the bonus question. People think, hold on to your hats for this one, people think that the plates were removed due to the fact it didn't belong on that RAV, being that the car that was found on the salvage yard wasn't her original. What do you think? So it goes back to 2 RAVs.
Nah, I can't get my mind around the fact there's 2 RAVs. The time frames don't fit in being able to find a second vehicle. It's too easy to prove that the planted vehicle, if it wasn't Teresa's, was. It's too easy to prove that it's not Teresa's vehicle. It's just a simple VIN check, and indeed would have been one of the first things they would have done when they found it. They would have confirmed it was her vehicle. I mean, that's as simple as probationary police officer type stuff.
Yeah.
So the first thing we do when we find a car that's with no plates on it is we pop the hood, or have a look at the VIN plate number on the windscreen and check the VIN number, just because we don't know what this car is or who owns it or anything. Yeah. So taking the plates off to hide the identity of the RAV is I think it's a moot point as well, because you can't hide the identity of the vehicle just by taking the plates off.
Yeah,
it's very common. I mean, it's criminal law, 101 to make sure the identity of whatever you're looking at, and that VIN number will always give the game away.
Absolutely. They did say that the cops themselves even said that the VIN looked like it had been tampered with. Some of the pictures of the VIN does look a bit blurry, and some you can see that it is the VIN, but it's a close shot, so it doesn't show the overall body of the car that they're taking of.
There's other identifying marks on a vehicle that, like on the engine block itself, you've got engine block numbers, you've got chassis numbers. It's very, very hard, unless you own a professional chop shop, where you cut out bits of chassis cross members, or you can grind off engine numbers. It's very hard to alter a vehicle's identity, because you got things like data dots and that sort of thing as well. But I don't think they're around when this RAV was taken. But engine block numbers, chassis numbers, VIN numbers, they're all indicators of a vehicle, of vehicle's identity. And unless you know what you're doing and you have the proper equipment and know-how to alter those, you just can't alter the identity of a vehicle. It's so hard.
Yeah. I just want to kind of finish it up with just saying that Colburn apparently has a background as a mechanic. So I just wanted to tie that in because, like you said, if he was going to plant like a second RAV and stuff, everything we've summed up tonight about the RAV, from the plates to the battery that was found in there that didn't apparently belong to Teresa, and it being disconnected and all that, that's all part of a thought process. And if Colburn was the one that, had this experience, he would have turned around to the boys and said, hey, listen, truth is exactly that. It's going to be too hard to be swapping VINs, installing customised sunroofs, making sure we find the colour of a car, all these specific details. As a mechanic, he would know better than to just not do that.
There's no way he would have had the time to alter an engine block number or a chassis number. That takes a long time. You got to pull the whole thing apart. You got to drop everything. It's very, very difficult, and you don't just do that in a day. No.
Well, and like we said, we're already on a timeline here of at least, afternoon on the 3rd, planted by the 4th, and then there is some people that just say, hey, if it's Bobby, like Zelna's saying, it never was found until the 5th, so there was no tampering with it, period, because Bobby didn't have a salvage yard he could pull out and start doing all this stuff. So, again, you're limiting that, the possibilities, it just...
Yeah.
It is what it is.
If it was Bobby, he wouldn't have had the means to be able to source a second car, so it can't have been a second vehicle. If it was law enforcement, there's not enough time frame to doctor everything, so that if the vehicle is examined properly, that it won't be found out.
Absolutely. So just with the 2 final questions to sum up this part of the evidence. Out of all the above evidence, which one stands out to you the most?
How do you mean?
So out of all of it, which one as a law enforcement do you just laugh and go, I can't even believe that was even...
Probably the blood in the car.
The blood in the car.
Yeah. I think that is totally discredited. I mean, to have blood and flake indicates that the blood was in two different stages at the time that was put in the car, and obviously that's impossible.
Yeah.
And the locations of where the blood was found is again completely implausible, especially if they're trying to intimate that it was from a cut in Stephen's hand, because the blood would be in a lot more obvious places than where they found it.
Absolutely. And the last question is, do you think that item A23, which is a partial blood print that was found at the back of the RAV, that has been ruled out, that it's not Teresa, it's not Stephen, it's not Brendan, do you think that's from the killer or more than likely the planter, if there was 2 separate forces working together? Well, not so much together, but sliding doors. So you've got a killer making things easy for the cops to find, and then the cops going, oh, now we found this, we'll just make it Avery. So there, like I said, there's a partial blood print called A23 found at the back of the RAV. Do you think that would be more likely the killers or the planners?
Oh, the killer, for sure.
The killer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because when Colwyn found the car, the blood, if Teresa's blood was in the car, it would have been dry.
Mm-hmm.
So the only person who could have had Teresa's wet blood on her, on the person, was the killer, or whoever was, whoever the killer told, like in the very, very immediate time frame after the event. So I don't think it would have been anyone from law enforcement.
Yes.
If it was a bloody handprint, it would have to have been the killer.
That's what we think. So that sums up this part of the evidence that was used to prosecute Stephen. Like I said at the very beginning, there's still the bones, item FL, and the hood latch. I just wanted to break this down because, it's just such a complex case. You've got to, if we keep going, we'll be going for ages.
Yeah.
And you'll be, like you said to me, slow down. It's just so much. So I wanted to stop it here and then get you to refocus on the next stuff. But yeah, thank you so much again. As always, it's been great. You give us more than we can ask for when it comes down to breaking down the law enforcement side of it. So thank you again. And I'll start sending you all the bone stuff and we'll go from there.
All right, cool.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
See ya.